All right, welcome back. This is Newslink right here on ENCA. We'll have more of your news in just a moment, including this. Do not expect an above-inflation salary increase this year. That's according to the SA Reward Association. Economic pressures remain top of mind for many South Africans. It says COVID-19, the power crisis, and rates, as well as rising input costs, have all affected many companies. Now, this is bad news for highly indebted South Africans who spend about 73% of income to service debt. But for more on this story, we're now joined by the association's Kirk Kruger, who joins me for this conversation. Kirk, thank you so much for your time and a very warm good morning to you. Not the best of news that South Africans want to hear. You're absolutely right. I mean, if we're looking at 73% of one's salary going to servicing debt, you would know that an increase would be lovely to assist some of the workers. But tell us why that may not be the case for most people this year.
Yes, I think the challenges that are faced by companies in South Africa have to do with the after effects of COVID. We've also seen societal unrest, the impact of load shedding, and a lot of challenges around infrastructure. And so companies themselves are also under pressure. And they need to balance the book, so to speak. They need to make sure that any increases awarded are within budget and sustainable, because an increase, once it's awarded, is an annuity expense. It goes on into the future. And so companies are having to really look carefully at how much they are going to spend on salary increases.
But also, it seems that COVID-19, power cuts, amongst other things, as you've mentioned, all contribute to a company making, a decision as to whether or not they can afford a salary increment this year. One wonders, are we still seeing the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, Kirk?
I think so. There was obviously a massive impact on business in South Africa and across the world. And although we have seen an uptick in economic activity, especially in the developed economies, even things like the Ukrainian war is still impacting on the ability of companies to deliver exceptional results. And yes, I think we are still feeling the lag effects of COVID-19.
I mean, even though I remember quite recently when the Reserve Bank was expected to make an announcement on whether, inflation rates would be increased, they did not. The Reserve Bank Governor Lesotho Kganyago said they would remain unchanged. It was somewhat of a bittersweet pill to swallow. Sweet in a sense that, okay, it seems the rates stay where they are. There's no increment, but also bitter because we would have hoped for them to at least go down. And the messaging is that we should not expect them to go down any time soon. So take me through that 73%, statistic that you mentioned, where most debts are being serviced by 73% of our salaries.
Yes, I think it's important to point out that was research done for people who are currently under debt counseling. So that does not necessarily apply to everybody. But yes, there are many individuals who will utilize up to 70% of their net income to service debt. We see that people are having to support an extended family. So the days of perhaps providing only for the nuclear family is long gone. We have unemployment at nearly 33%. So people are having to sustain a larger group of family. And that puts them under financial pressure. And the borrowing then is a way of dealing with that financial pressure. A large amount of that does go to home loans, vehicle and asset financing, but a very big part is unsecured debt. So in other words, that is a personal loan, a credit card, and people are finding that is catching up with them to the point that the majority of their salary is paying down that debt, and that leaves them in a very difficult situation.
Yeah. So, Kirk, how would you then advise, workers, consumers amidst this obviously challenging economic climate?
I would say it's important to start with being realistic about your income and expenses. So sit down, do a budget, look at what the earnings are, and cut according to the cloth, so to speak. In other words, if the earnings are X, then cut expenses so that they meet that X number. Also, be very careful of living beyond one's means. There are many, attractive products and services out there, and I would say that consumers should critically think about whether they really need, to make that new purchase. Can they really afford it? And really try to keep within that monthly income that they may have.
Yeah, I mean, also one may think that simply trying to jump from one job to the next, hoping for greener pastures, it may be an easier option. But is it easier said than done in this current job market?
I think it is. There are certain key skills that are in high demand in the market. But the reality is that a very small group of people have some of those skills. And so it's quite difficult to, jump to a job that pays more. And people also need to think about their careers. How does that move impact their careers? Is it good for their career? And so rather than just moving for the sake of money and then having to really start again from scratch in the new employer, trying to build credibility, people should think, carefully about whether that is the easiest solution. But for many, it's not even an option because of our challenging economic environment. There aren't that many options. And so sometimes people will need to ride out the current job they have, make the most of the income that they are getting at the time.
Well, thank you so much, Kirk, for speaking to us about this. I think quite a realistic conversation to have, especially given that it's September now, almost October, going into December, where most would be expecting their 13th check. And I think the reality is sit down, work with what you already have, and see if you can't, of course, save there and make amends. Thank you so much, Kirk Kruger, of course, from the South African Reward Association, joining us this morning right here on Newslink.